They say silence in a boardroom costs more than shouting on a factory floor. On that frozen January afternoon in Chicago, the silence cost everything. Thaddeus Whitmore's fist hit the obsidian table hard enough to rattle 12 coffee cups. His voice carried the kind of rage that comes from a man who's never been told no in his adult life. You dared to sabotage my deal. $2.4 billion. 9 months of negotiation. Gone because you... Lorelei Ashford stood across from him, spine straight despite the tremor in her knees. Her charcoal blazer had cost $47 at a clearance sale 3 years ago, and everyone in the room could tell. 11 board members watched like spectators at an execution, none meeting her eyes. I didn't sabotage anything, Mr. Whitmore. I saved this company from bankruptcy. The words hung in the air. Electric. One of the board members, a silver-haired woman in pearls, shifted uncomfortably. The others remained frozen. Thad stepped closer, close enough that Lorelei could smell his cologne, something expensive that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to cost. His jaw worked, the muscles bunching. You have no idea what you've... The sound of wheels on marble interrupted him. Everyone turned. Augustus Whitmore rolled through the doorway in his wheelchair, pushed by no one. But then, as the room held its collective breath, he placed both gnarled hands on the armrests. The old man stood. Not shakily, not tentatively. He stood like a man who'd been waiting for exactly this moment to prove he wasn't dead yet. Thad's face went the color of old newspaper. Dad, you can walk? Gus Whitmore took 3 steps forward, each one deliberate. He leaned on nothing. His charcoal suit hung a bit loose on his 81-year-old frame, but his eyes were sharp as cut glass. I've been walking for 6 months, son. Just wanted to see what you'd do when you thought I was helpless. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Thad, Gus's voice was quiet, but it carried. You just lost this company. But to understand how an 81-year-old steel magnate and a bankrupt 29-year-old waitress ended up in that boardroom, locked in a war that would reshape a $5 billion empire, you have to go back 90 days, back to a different kind of cold. The January morning when Lorelei Ashford signed away everything she'd spent 7 years building. The law office on West Adams smelled like old paper and crushed dreams. Lorelei's hand cramped as she signed the final document, the pen leaving an indent in the cheap paper. That's the last one, Miss Ashford. The lawyer, a tired-looking man named Patterson with coffee stains on his tie, slid the papers into a manila folder. Novatech Solutions is officially dissolved. Lorelei stared at the folder. 7 years, 70-hour work weeks, maxed credit cards, skipped meals, 3 rounds of funding, 12 employees who'd believed in her vision for AI-powered logistics. All of it compressed into a manila folder that would end up in a filing cabinet somewhere, forgotten. The acquisition by Whitmore Steel Industries went through at a distressed valuation. Patterson's voice carried the careful neutrality of a man who delivered bad news for a living. They paid 32 cents on the dollar for your patents. Technically legal, but morally... He trailed off. Lorelei filled in the blank herself. Morally bankrupt. Whitmore had waited until Novatech was bleeding out from a lawsuit, a patent infringement claim that turned out to be completely fabricated but cost $100,000 in legal fees to fight. By the time the smoke cleared, Novatech's runway was gone. Whitmore swooped in like a vulture. You could sue. Patterson adjusted his glasses. We might find something in discovery. Lorelei looked at him. Really looked. The man probably made $60,000 a year. He was offering to go up against a company with a legal department that cost more than his annual salary every week. With what money, Mr. Patterson? I'm $340,000 in debt. Personal guarantees on business loans. Legal fees. Medical bills for my mother. She stood, picking up her worn leather bag. The zipper was broken on one side, held together with a safety pin. Patterson stood as well, that awkward half-rise of a man who knows he should do more but can't. For what it's worth, Ms. Ashford, your technology was revolutionary. What Whitmore did, it wasn't right. Lorelei managed something that might have been a smile. Right doesn't pay bills, Mr. Patterson, but thank you. Outside, Chicago's January wind cut through her coat like it wasn't even there. She walked 3 blocks to the L station, each step a small negotiation with shoes that should have been replaced 6 months ago. The sole on the left one was separating. On the train heading south toward Pilsen, she pulled out her phone. 23 unread emails, 16 from collection agencies, 4 from her mother's hospital in Columbus, 3 from Novatech employees asking if there was any severance. There wasn't. She closed her email and opened her photos instead. The last one was from 3 years ago, the day Novatech closed its Series A. 12 people crowded into their tiny office in River North, champagne in plastic cups, Lorelei in the center with a smile that looked like it might break her face in half. She'd been 26 and stupid enough to believe that working hard and being smart was enough. The train rattled over the Chicago River. Lorelei watched the water below, gray as old concrete. Her phone buzzed. Columbus area code. She answered. Lorelei, honey. Her mother's voice was thin, stretched. Catherine Ashford had the kind of voice that used to sing in church choirs, but kidney failure had stolen the bottom registers. Did you get my voicemail? Lorelei had gotten all 4 voicemails. She'd been too much of a coward to listen to them. I'm sorry, Mom. Things have been... I know, sweetheart, I know. A pause, the sound of machines beeping in the background. The doctor said I need the surgery sooner. My levels are getting worse. Lorelei closed her eyes. $285,000. That's what a kidney transplant cost when your insurance company decided that end-stage renal disease was a pre-existing condition and therefore not covered. Never mind that Catherine had paid premiums for 23 years. We'll figure it out, Mom. Lorelei Marie Ashford. The use of her middle name meant business. Don't you dare go into more debt for me. I'm 68 years old. I've had a good life. You're 29. You have... Don't. Lorelei's voice came out sharper than she intended. Don't you dare talk like that. Silence. Then Catherine's voice, softer. Your father would be so proud of you. You know that, right? Garrett would have been so proud. Lorelei's throat closed up. 10 years. It had been 10 years since the factory accident that killed her father. 10 years since Garrett Ashford, third-shift supervisor at a parts manufacturer, got crushed by a hydraulic press that should have had a safety cage, but the company had removed it to save 18 seconds per cycle. The settlement had been $60,000. After the lawyers took their cut and the hospital bills from his 3 days on life support, there'd been enough left to bury him and pay for 1 semester of Lorelei's computer science degree. I miss him, Mom. Me too, baby. Me too. They talked for another 5 minutes about nothing important. Catherine's neighbor who was feuding with the mailman. The weather. Whether Columbus would get snow this weekend. The kind of conversation that feels normal until you hang up and remember that your mother is dying and you're broke and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. When Lorelei got back to her apartment, a studio in Pilsen that she was 2 months behind on rent for, she found the eviction notice taped to her door. Bright orange, impossible to miss. She peeled it off, crumpled it, and threw it in the direction of the overflowing trash can. It missed. Inside, the apartment was cold. The radiator had been making concerning noises for a week. Lorelei pulled on 2 sweaters and sat on her futon, staring at the wall. On her laptop, a 6-year-old MacBook with a cracked screen, she pulled up her bank account. Balance, $912.47. She had 3 options: pay rent and starve, buy food and get evicted, or try to scrape together enough for a train ticket to Columbus in case her mother took a turn. The smart thing, the logical thing, would be to declare bankruptcy, walk away from the Novatech debt, start over. But Garrett Ashford's voice was in her head, clear as if he were sitting next to her on this lumpy futon. The last coherent thing he'd said before the machines took over. Don't seek revenge, honey. Don't let anger make you small. Build something better. Lorelei opened Indeed. She'd been putting off the inevitable, but money was money. She scrolled through listings. Data analyst positions wanted 5 years of enterprise experience. Junior developer roles offered $40,000 a year for 60-hour weeks. Customer service rep, overnight shift, $12 an hour. Then she saw it. The Sovereign, a 3-Michelin-star restaurant in Gold Coast, was hiring servers. Experience preferred but not required. Tips averaged $200 a night. $200 a night. 5 nights a week. That was $4,000 a month. It wouldn't cover everything, but it would keep her head above water while she figured out the next move. Lorelei had never waited tables in her life. She'd gone straight from high school to university to startup world. But how hard could it be? You carried food, smiled, and didn't drop anything. She clicked apply. The response came back in 40 minutes. An interview tomorrow at 2 p.m. Wear all black. Be prepared to start immediately. Lorelei looked at her closet. She had one black outfit that still fit, slacks from her Novatech pitch days, and a blouse with a small stain near the collar. It would have to work. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, listening to sirens and her neighbor's TV through the thin walls, and thought about the fact that she had a master's degree in computer science from Northwestern, and tomorrow she was going to interview to carry plates. Pride was expensive. Pride didn't keep you warm or fed or prevent your mother from dying. At 1:45 the next afternoon, Lorelei stood outside the Sovereign, trying not to visibly shiver. The building was a converted limestone mansion with ivy growing up the sides and a doorman who looked like he earned more than she used to. Inside smelled like money, old wood, fresh flowers, something cooking that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget per ounce. A man approached, mid-50s, silver hair slicked back, wearing a suit that probably had his name sewn into it. His eyes traveled over Lorelei in a way that made her want to shower. "Ms. Ashford, I'm Beaumont Laurent, general manager. You're here for the server position." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." Beaumont walked a slow circle around her, like she was livestock at auction. Lorelei kept her spine straight, her face neutral. She'd pitched to venture capitalists. She could handle one pretentious restaurant manager. "You're older than we usually hire. Most of our servers are college students. You're what, 30? 29. He stopped in front of her, arms crossed. "No restaurant experience, but you have a master's degree in computer science." Lorelei's stomach sank. She debated leaving that off her resume, but lying seemed worse. "I do. I was running a tech company that recently dissolved. I need work while I figure out my next move." Beaumont's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We serve clientele who value discretion, Ms. Ashford. Billionaires, politicians, people who don't want to hear about their servers' startup dreams or philosophical thoughts on machine learning. Can you be invisible when required?" The question hung between them, loaded with disdain. Lorelei thought about her mother on dialysis, about the eviction notice, about her negative $912 after this month's automatic loan payments went through. "Yes, sir, I can be invisible." "Good. You start tomorrow, 5 p.m., all black, proper black, not what you're wearing now. Those shoes are unacceptable. Black leather, closed toe, non-slip, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, no jewelry except small earrings. You'll shadow Travis for the first shift. After that, you're on your own." He pulled out a folder, slid a W-4 across the hostess stand. "We pay $3.75 an hour plus tips. You claim all your tips. We report everything to the IRS. If I catch you stealing, I call the police. If you're late, you're fired. If you talk back to a guest, you're fired. If you make a mistake that embarrasses this establishment, you're fired. Are we clear?" Crystal. Lorelei signed the paperwork with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. That night, she walked to a Goodwill and found a pair of black, non-slip shoes that only hurt a little. They cost $15 she didn't have, but the cashier took pity and let her pay $12. The next evening, Lorelei reported to the Sovereign at 4:45. Beaumont barely looked at her, just pointed to a thin kid with acne scars and kind eyes. Travis, new girl, teach her the basics. She's taking table 8 tonight. Travis led Lorelei through the kitchen, a gleaming testament to stainless steel and organized chaos, and into a break room that smelled like cigarettes and bleach. Basics are simple. Travis was 20, maybe 21, with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had to choose between food and rent. Water and bread service first. Never refill wine without asking. Remember, allergies. Don't speak unless spoken to. The kitchen runs like hell, so if you see Chef Marcus lose his temper, just stay out of his way. They practiced carrying plates. Lorelei's shoulders ached after 20 minutes. Travis showed her how to balance 4 dishes on one arm, how to clear a table without being noticed, how to smile without looking fake. At 6:30, the dinner rush started. Lorelei's first table was a couple celebrating an anniversary. They were kind, patient with her fumbling the breadbasket. They tipped 22%. Her second table was a group of lawyers who barely acknowledged her existence. They tipped 15. By 9 p.m., Lorelei's feet felt like they were being crushed in a vice. Her lower back screamed. She'd been moving non-stop for 4.5 hours, and she still had another hour before close. Travis caught her leaning against the wall near the kitchen, eyes closed. First shift's always the worst. You get used to it. How long does that take? He grinned. About 6 months. At 10:45, Beaumont gathered the staff. 6 servers, 3 bussers, 2 sommeliers, 1 host. He stood in front of them like a general before battle. Tomorrow night, we have table 1, the Whitmore family. The room went silent. Even Travis, who'd been joking around 2 seconds ago, straightened up. For those of you new, Beaumont's eyes found Lorelei. Table 1 is reserved for our highest value clients. The Whitmores are Chicago royalty. Augustus Whitmore built Whitmore Steel Industries from nothing. $5.2 billion in annual revenue. His son Thaddeus is CEO. They dine here monthly. Beaumont paused for effect. If anyone makes a mistake tomorrow, drops a glass, speaks out of turn, breathes wrong, that person will be fired before the Whitmores leave the building. Am I understood? A chorus of, "Yes, chef." Lorelei's stomach turned to ice. Whitmore, the company that had destroyed Novatech. The vultures who'd picked her life's work clean. After the shift, as Lorelei limped to the L station with $147 in cash tips weighing down her pocket, she pulled out her phone and Googled. Augustus Whitmore, 81, widower. Started Whitmore Steel in 1962 with a $500 loan. Built it into one of the largest steel manufacturers in the Rust Belt. Known for ruthless business practices and absolute loyalty to employees. A walking contradiction. Hadn't given a public interview in 15 years. Thaddeus Whitmore, 38, Harvard MBA. Took over as CEO 7 years ago when his father suffered a stroke. Reputation for aggressive expansion and cost-cutting. Currently pushing a merger with Consolidated Materials, a Texas conglomerate. Lorelei stared at Thaddeus's photo. Sharp suit, sharper smile. The kind of man who looked through people instead of at them. This was the man who'd signed off on Novatech's acquisition. She'd bet her last dollar on it. On the train home, exhaustion settled into her bones. But underneath it was something else. Something that felt dangerous. She was going to serve dinner to the people who destroyed her company. Tomorrow night. When Lorelei got home, there was a message from her mother. Just a voicemail this time, Catherine's voice thin and tired. "Honey, I found something in Dad's old boxes. A letter from Edmund Burke. You know, Grandpa Silas's best friend. The one who died back in '08. The letter talks about a loan they made in 1962. $500 to a young man who wanted to start a scrap metal business. Edmund wrote that the man promised to pay them back double, but he never found him again. I'll scan it and email you. Love you, baby. Lorelei sat down hard on her futon. 1962, $500, scrap metal business. Augustus Whitmore had started Whitmore Steel in 1962 with a $500 loan. It couldn't be. The world wasn't that small, that neat. But she pulled up the Forbes article again, reading more carefully this time. Whitmore credits two Pittsburgh steelworkers, whom he declines to name, with giving him the seed money to purchase his first scrapyard in 1962. I owed them everything, Whitmore said in a rare 1987 interview. I searched for them for 30 years, never found them. That's my greatest regret. Lorelei's hands started shaking. Edmund Burke and Silas Ashford had both worked Pittsburgh steel mills in the early 60s before moving to Columbus for better factory jobs. Her grandfather had died in 1998, Edmund in 2008. Both men had worked their whole lives for hourly wages. Neither had ever owned anything, but they'd given $500, everything they had, to a kid with a dream. And that kid became a billionaire who destroyed companies like Novatech for sport. Lorelei stood up, pacing the tiny apartment. Her mind raced through calculations. $500 in 1962, with compound interest at even conservative rates over 63 years. She grabbed her laptop, pulled up a financial calculator. $500 at 7% annual return from 1962 to 2025 equaled roughly $43,000. But that wasn't how fortunes worked. If that 500 had bought into Whitmore Steel as equity, even 1%, and grown with the company, Whitmore Steel was worth $5.2 billion. 1% would be $52 million. Lorelei's grandfather had died with $17,000 in savings. Edmund Burke had died in a VA home, his funeral paid for by the state, while Augustus Whitmore lived in a Lake Forest mansion. The next evening, Lorelei arrived at the Sovereign 30 minutes early. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, so she stood in the walk-in freezer for 5 minutes until they steadied. Beaumont had assigned her to water and bread service for table 1, the lowest risk position. She was to pour water, deliver bread, and disappear. Nothing more. At 7:20, the Whitmore party arrived. Thaddeus came first. Lorelei recognized him from photos, but in person he was more polished, more present, more dangerous. He wore a navy Tom Ford suit and had an AirPod in one ear, talking rapid fire about stock positions and merger timelines. Then came the wheelchair. Cordelia Blackwell pushed it, a tall woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. But it was the man in the chair who made Lorelei's breath catch. Augustus Whitmore looked smaller than she'd imagined, shrunken inside a charcoal suit that had probably fit him perfectly 10 years ago. His hands were gnarled with arthritis, spotted with age, but his eyes were clear, sharp, aware. He looked like a king who'd conquered the world and found it wanting. The restaurant fell silent as they passed. Other diners, powerful people in their own right, went quiet. This was what real money looked like, real power. Beaumont personally escorted them to table 1, tucked in an alcove with velvet curtains for privacy. He fussed over the seating, the lighting, the temperature. Lorelei took her position at the service station, filling a crystal pitcher with ice water. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Through the curtain gap, she could hear them. Thad's voice, tight with barely controlled frustration. Father, the board needs a decision on Consolidated by Friday. You can't keep stalling. Silence. Then Gus's voice, rough as gravel on asphalt. I'm not stalling. I'm thinking. You've been thinking for 4 months. This merger will secure our position for the next decade. $2.4 billion in combined revenue. We'll dominate the regional market. Don't trust them. You don't trust anyone anymore. Thad's voice rose slightly, then lowered, aware of their surroundings. The paranoia is getting worse. Dr. Pemberton says, Dr. Pemberton is your man, not mine, and his pills make me stupid. Beaumont appeared at Lorelei's elbow, making her jump. Water service. Now, do not speak unless spoken to. Lorelei picked up the pitcher. It was heavier than the practice ones, real crystal instead of glass. Her hands wanted to shake again. She forced them still. She approached table 1, the curtain parting as she stepped through. Up close, Gus Whitmore looked even more diminished. His neck seemed too thin for his collar. His hands trembled slightly where they rested on the white tablecloth. But when she started pouring water into his glass, his head turned. He looked at her. Really looked, not through her, and for a second, something flickered in those sharp eyes. Recognition? No, that was impossible. Lorelei finished pouring, moved to Thad's glass. He didn't acknowledge her existence, still reviewing something on his phone. Cordelia smiled slightly. Thank you, dear. Lorelei retreated. Over the next hour, 6 courses came out, each one a masterpiece of molecular gastronomy and precise technique. Each one returned to the kitchen, barely touched. Chef Marcus, a temperamental genius with a god complex, nearly threw a sauté pan when the Wagyu Wellington came back untouched. He insults me. This is art. Does he want McDonald's? The sommelier brought a bottle of wine that cost more than Lorelei's monthly rent used to cost. Gus waved it away. Thad ate mechanically, clearly frustrated. He kept trying to talk business. Gus kept deflecting or ignoring him entirely. By the 4th course, a truffle risotto that smelled like heaven, Lorelei could see Gus's energy flagging. He slouched in his wheelchair, picking at the tablecloth with one gnarled finger. She heard him mutter something. Beaumont was too far away to hear, but Lorelei was at the service station, close enough. Too cold, too fancy, no soul. It wasn't the food, or rather, it wasn't just the food. Lorelei had seen this before. Her grandfather in his last year. Dementia had made him forget names, places, decades of his life. But smells could bring him back. The scent of motor oil, fresh cut lumber, her grandmother's meatloaf, not fancy French cuisine, not Wagyu or truffles or foam, home cooking, working class food, the kind of meal you ate after a 12-hour shift, grateful just to have something hot. Lorelei glanced toward the kitchen. Through the pass, she could see the staff meal, what the crew ate before service. Tonight it was Travis's grandmother's recipe, meatloaf with brown gravy, mashed potatoes, simple dinner rolls, the food Gus Whitmore would have eaten in 1962 when he was 18 and working steel mills for $2.50 an hour. She shouldn't. Beaumont had been crystal clear. Don't speak. Don't improvise. Be invisible. But Gus Whitmore was slumped in his chair, staring at a $60 plate of risotto like it was ashes. And somewhere in Columbus, her mother was on a dialysis machine, and this man, this billionaire who looked so small and lost, owed her family 63 years of debt. Lorelei walked into the kitchen. Travis was eating staff meal at the prep counter. I need a plate of that. Now. Travis looked up confused. The meatloaf? Chef made it for... Please, I'll explain later. Something in her voice made him move. He plated it quickly. Meatloaf, gravy, mashed potatoes, a roll on the side. Simple. Honest. Lorelei carried it out before she could second-guess herself. Beaumont saw her crossing the dining room with an unauthorized plate and went the color of old cheese. He started toward her, mouth opening. She was faster. Lorelei stepped through the curtain to table 1. Thad was in the middle of a sentence about quarterly projections. He stopped mid-word, staring at her. She placed the plate in front of Gus Whitmore. For you, sir, like the old days. The room went silent. Thad's face transformed, shock giving way to fury. Cordelia's eyebrows rose. Beaumont burst through the curtain, already speaking. Mr. Whitmore, I am so sorry. This server is new. She's being terminated immediately. Gus raised one hand. The gesture was small, but absolute. Beaumont stopped mid-sentence. Gus looked at the plate. then at Lorelei. His eyes were wet. "What's your name?" "Lorelei Ashford, sir." Something passed over his face. A flicker of, what? Confusion? Pain? He picked up his fork with shaking hands, cut a piece of meatloaf, brought it to his mouth. He chewed, swallowed, closed his eyes. When they opened again, there were tears on his cheeks. "Edmund Burke," his voice cracked. "You knew him?" Lorelei's heart stopped. "Edmund was my grandfather's best friend, sir. They worked the Pittsburgh mills together." Gus made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Silas. Silas Ashford was your grandfather?" "Yes, sir." The old man's hands started shaking harder. He put down his fork, pressed his palms flat against the table. "I owed them everything. I looked for them for 30 years. I never—" His voice broke completely. "I never got to pay them back." Thad stood up so fast his chair scraped. "What the hell is going on? Beaumont, I told you to—" "Sit down, Thaddeus." Gus's voice wasn't loud, but Thad sat. The old man looked at Lorelei, really looked, and she saw the boy he'd been. 18 years old, broke, hungry, desperate. Two men giving him their entire savings because they saw something in him worth betting on. "I promised them double in 5 years," Gus whispered. "When I came back in '67, they were gone, moved away. I hired investigators, spent hundreds of thousands. I never found them." Lorelei felt tears pricking her own eyes. "Edmund had a stroke in '75, lost his speech. Grandpa Silas didn't want you to see him like that. They moved to Columbus for better factory work. Silas died in '98, Edmund in 2008. Neither of them ever owned anything, Mr. Whitmore. They died working class." The weight of those words settled over the table like a shroud. Gus picked up his napkin, pressed it to his eyes. His shoulders shook. Thad stared at all of them like they'd lost their minds. "Father, you're getting agitated. Dr. Pemberton said stress." "To hell with Dr. Pemberton." Gus's voice was stronger now. He picked up the dinner roll, tore it in half, and dragged it through the gravy on his plate. The gesture was crude, working class, completely out of place in this 3-Michelin-star temple to haute cuisine. He ate the bread, every crumb. Then he looked up at Beaumont, who was hovering like an anxious ghost. "This girl stays. If you fire her, I never come back." Beaumont's face went through several complicated emotions before settling on obsequious agreement. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore, of course." Gus pulled something from his inner jacket pocket. A business card, heavy stock, embossed. He handed it to Lorelei with shaking hands. "Call tomorrow, 2 p.m. We need to talk." Lorelei took the card. It was warm from being close to his heart. The name printed on it wasn't Gus Whitmore's. It said Cordelia Blackwell, with a phone number. Nothing else. "Yes, sir." Thad's jaw was so tight it looked painful. He stood again, slower this time. "We're leaving. Father needs rest." Cordelia rose smoothly, moving behind Gus's wheelchair. But before she pushed him away, the old man reached out and caught Lorelei's hand. His grip was weak, but insistent. "Edmund and Silas, tell me about them, how they died." "Edmund died in a VA home. The state paid for his funeral. Grandpa Silas fell at a construction site in '98, traumatic brain injury. He lasted 3 days. My grandmother sold everything to pay the hospital bills." Gus's face crumpled. "I could have saved them. If I just found them." "They didn't blame you," Lorelei said, and she wasn't sure where the words came from, but they felt true. "My mother found a letter Edmund wrote in '78, before the stroke. He was proud of you. He said giving you that money was the best thing he ever did." That broke him. Gus Whitmore, billionaire, steel magnate, titan of industry, sat in his wheelchair in the middle of the Sovereign and wept like a child. Cordelia's hand found his shoulder, gentle. Thad looked away, jaw working. After a long moment, Gus collected himself. He wiped his face with his napkin, straightened his shoulders. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't be late. Then Cordelia pushed him out, Thad following, the three of them leaving silence in their wake. Beaumont turned to Lorelei. His face was purple. You think because he defended you that you're safe? You humiliated this restaurant. You served staff food to our most important client. He ate it. That's not the point. Beaumont's voice rose high enough that other diners looked over. He caught himself, lowered it to a hiss. You violated every protocol. You made me look like an idiot. Get your things. You're fired. Don't bother coming back. He ripped the apron from her waist, shoved it at her chest. Lorelei took it, walked to the break room, changed out of her uniform. When she came back out, Travis was waiting by the hostess stand, eyes sympathetic. That was the gutsiest thing I've ever seen. Or the stupidest. Probably both. He pressed something into her hand. Cash. Tonight's tips. You earned them. Lorelei looked down. $163. Thanks, Travis. Outside, the February night was brutally cold. Lorelei stood on the sidewalk, looking at the business card in her hand. She'd just been fired from a job she'd held for 36 hours. She was still $340,000 in debt. Her mother was still dying. But Augustus Whitmore, the man whose company had destroyed Novatech, owed her family a 63-year-old debt. And tomorrow at 2 p.m., she was going to find out what that was worth. Lorelei walked to the L station, her broken shoes letting in slush with every step. $163 in tips making her pocket heavy, and a business card that might change everything clutched in her freezing hand. She didn't know it yet, but she just fired the first shot in a war that would reshape a $5 billion empire. All because of a plate of meatloaf and two men who'd believed in a hungry kid with fire in his eyes. The Lake Forest estate sat 40 minutes north of Chicago by Metro train, which cost Lorelei $8.75 she desperately needed for other things. She'd called the number on Cordelia Blackwell's card at exactly 2 p.m., half expecting a secretary to laugh and hang up. Instead, Cordelia herself had answered on the second ring. Ms. Ashford, Mr. Whitmore has been expecting your call since 7 this morning. Can you be here by 3? No small talk. No explanation. Now Lorelei stood outside iron gates that probably cost more than her college education, punching in a code Cordelia had given her. The gates swung open with the smooth silence of expensive machinery. The driveway stretched a quarter-mile through bare oak trees. The main house loomed at the end, gray stone, ivy-covered, windows that reflected the pale winter sky like blank eyes. 14 acres of manicured nothing surrounded. This was wealth on a scale that made you understand why revolutions happen. Cordelia met her at the front door before Lorelei could knock. She wore wool trousers and a cashmere sweater, steel gray hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. You're exactly on time. Good. The interior was all dark wood and marble, the kind of house designed to remind you that you didn't belong. Family portraits lined the main hall, the oldest dated 1962, a formal photo of a young couple. The woman was beautiful in that patrician way, blonde and cold. The man was Gus, 40 years younger, uncomfortable in a suit that didn't quite fit. That's Vivienne. Cordelia's voice held complicated layers. She was Boston money, old money. She thought marrying a self-made steelworker would be romantic. Was it? For about 6 months. Cordelia walked deeper into the house, footsteps silent on Persian rugs. Then she realized Augustus Whitmore was exactly what he appeared to be, the son of West Virginia coal miners who'd rather work a blast furnace than attend charity galas. The marriage lasted 32 years. I'm not sure either of them was happy for more than a handful of those. She led Lorelei to a study that smelled like leather and old paper. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, most of the books looking unread. A massive desk, empty except for a single photograph. Gus sat in a leather chair by the fireplace. No wheelchair. He held a cane across his lap, his hands resting on the carved wooden handle. Miss Ashford, please, sit. Lorelei took the chair opposite him. This close, she could see the cost of 81 years written in the lines of his face, the spots on his hands, the way his collar hung loose around his neck. He studied her with the same intensity he'd shown at the restaurant, like he was trying to solve a complex equation. Cordelia, bring the photograph. Cordelia moved to the desk, retrieved something, and placed it in Lorelei's hands. A black and white photo, edges worn soft with age. Three young men in work clothes stood outside a steel mill, arms around each other's shoulders. The tallest was maybe 18, grinning like he owned the world. The other two were older, weathered, kind-eyed. The youngest was Gus. The other two, that's them. Lorelei's throat closed. Edmund and Grandpa Silas. Pittsburgh, 1962. We worked the same shift at Allegheny Steel. Gus leaned forward, intensity burning in those sharp eyes. They gave me everything. I promised them double in 5 years. When I went back to pay them in 67, they were gone. I've been searching ever since. He reached over, tapped the photograph. Your mother found Edmund's letter. The one that said giving me that money was the best thing he ever did. That means more than you know. Lorelei found her voice. What do you want from me? To make it right. Not with money. Money's too easy. With a chance. Gus gestured to Cordelia, who produced a folder. 90 days. Come work for Whitmore Steel as temporary chief operating officer. Audit what my son has been doing. If you succeed, I transfer 20% of my voting shares into a trust for Edmund and Silas's descendants. 20% of $1.04 billion. His voice was matter-of-fact. If you fail, you get $78,000, the compound interest on their loan, and we part ways. Either way, your mother's surgery is covered today. That's not negotiable. Lorelei's head spun. This was insane. She'd been fired from a waitressing job yesterday. Now she was being offered a $1 billion inheritance based on a 90-day trial? What does Thad think about this? Thaddeus doesn't know yet. Something dangerous crossed Gus's face. He's going to be very unhappy, which is why Cordelia has already prepared the legal documentation. She's quite good at navigating corporate bylaws. I was a federal prosecutor for 20 years before Augustus hired me. Cordelia's smile was sharp. I know where all the procedural bodies are buried. Lorelei thought about her mother on dialysis, about Novatech's ashes, about two men who'd bet everything on a hungry kid and died before seeing what he became. She signed the contract. The Whitmore Steel Industries headquarters occupied floors 48 through 52 of the Willis Tower in downtown Chicago. Lorelei's first day, a Monday in late February, she arrived at 7 a.m. to find her access badge already waiting at security. The elevator ride to floor 50 felt like ascending into a different atmosphere. At reception, a polished woman directed her up 2 more floors. Cordelia emerged from an office holding a tablet. Your office is here. Former COO retired 6 months ago. Thad never filled the position. He's been doing the job himself. The office was pristine, unused, with a view north toward Evanston. A desk sat empty except for a computer and a single file folder. What's this? Background reading. Start with the Consolidated Materials merger documents. They're dense. Dense was an understatement. Lorelei spent the first 2 hours reading, making notes, her stomach sinking with each page. At 9:15, Cordelia appeared in her doorway. Emergency board meeting in 20 minutes. 50th floor. Augustus called it this morning. I should probably skip that. I just started. You're COO. You're required to attend. The conference room was designed for intimidation. A table made from a single slab of black walnut, surrounded by leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago. Board members filed in. 11 in total, mostly men in their 50s and 60s. They eyed Lorelei with barely concealed curiosity. Mitchell Barnes, the CFO Cordelia had mentioned, took the seat to the right of the empty CEO chair. He leaned toward Lorelei. You must be the new assistant. Coffee's in the corner if anyone needs refills. Before Lorelei could correct him, the doors opened. Thad walked in, phone to his ear. He took the CEO chair without looking at anyone. Right. Let's make this quick. I have a call with Consolidated at 10. You'll want to cancel that. Cordelia's voice was ice. Thad looked up, noticed Lorelei for the first time. His eyes narrowed. What is she doing here? Attending her first board meeting as chief operating officer. The room went silent. Mitchell actually laughed, thinking it was a joke. When Cordelia didn't smile, his laugh died. Thad's face cycled through several colors before settling on a dangerous red. Dad appointed her? When? Saturday. I've already filed the paperwork with the Secretary of State. The CEO has authority to appoint executive officers subject to board ratification. We're here to ratify. This is insane. Thad stood, leaning on the table. She's a failed tech entrepreneur who was serving tables 3 days ago. She has a master's degree from Northwestern and 7 years building a company. And she's not being paid by Consolidated Materials to rubber stamp a merger. The accusation hung in the air like a grenade. Thad's voice dropped to a whisper. What did you just say? Cordelia slid a document across the table. Wire transfer, January 15th. Consolidated Materials to TRW Consulting LLC, a shell company you established last year. $500,000, 2 weeks before you formalized the merger proposal. Mitchell grabbed the document, scanned it, went pale. Other board members leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Thad's jaw worked. That's completely legitimate. I provided consulting services, market analysis. It's standard practice and fully disclosed. Except it wasn't disclosed. Cordelia produced another document. Your quarterly disclosure form, filed January 31st. No mention of TRW Consulting. The room erupted. The sound of wheels on marble interrupted them. Everyone turned. Gus rolled through the doorway in his wheelchair. But then, as the room held its collective breath, he placed both gnarled hands on the armrests. He stood, not shakily, not tentatively. He stood like a man who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Thad's face went the color of old newspaper. Dad, you can walk? Gus took 3 steps forward, each one deliberate. He leaned on nothing. I've been walking for 6 months, son. Just wanted to see what you'd do when you thought I was helpless. He looked at each board member in turn. I'm appointing Lorelei Ashford as COO. Anyone who votes against ratification can resign now. She has my full authority to audit every decision this company has made in the last 3 years, starting with Consolidated. Waverly Cross, a former federal judge in her early 70s, spoke up. I move we table the ratification vote until we have more information. Give Ms. Ashford 2 weeks to conduct preliminary audit. We reconvene to review her findings. Second, Mitchell's voice was cautious. 6 hands went up for the motion. 4 stayed down, including Thad's. Waverly nodded. Motion carries. Miss Ashford, you have until March 15th. The meeting dissolved. Thad stood, gathered his things, and walked out without another word. Mitchell approached Lorelei afterward. You just painted a target on your back. Thad doesn't forgive easily. Good thing I'm not asking for forgiveness. His eyebrows rose. Then surprisingly, he smiled. You might actually survive this. Come find me this afternoon. I'll get you access to the systems you'll need. And Ms. Ashford, I voted for the motion because I've been CFO here 12 years. I know what good judgment looks like. Your old CEO at Novatech didn't have it. You did. Over the next 14 days, Lorelei lived in spreadsheets. She arrived at 6 a.m., left at midnight, survived on coffee and the strange sense of purpose that comes from having nothing left to lose. Mitchell proved invaluable. On day 3, he showed her how Thad had restructured divisional reporting. The automotive segment's problems get obscured by strong performance in construction steel. Board sees aggregate numbers, assumes everything's fine. But automotive is our highest margin business. Was, past tense. We've lost 2 major contracts in 6 months. Quality issues. Thad's response was to cut QC staff by 20%. Lorelei made notes, her stomach churning. She also made enemies. On day 5, HR filed a formal complaint about privacy violations. On day 8, her computer access was mysteriously revoked for 6 hours. On day 10, someone leaked to the Wall Street Journal that Whitmore Steel was in chaos, triggering a 7% stock drop. On day 12, as Lorelei reviewed the consolidated merger documents for the 3rd time, something finally clicked. She pulled up Consolidated's EPA compliance reports, then news articles from Texas papers. At 2 a.m., she found it. Consistent tainted materials was being investigated by the EPA for illegal dumping at 3 Texas facilities. If the investigation resulted in fines, the cost could reach $800 million. The merger documents had a liability sharing clause buried on page 147. Post-merger, environmental liabilities would be distributed proportionally. Whitmore would inherit 42% of Consolidated's environmental problems. She did the math. 42% of $800 million was $336 million, enough to bankrupt Whitmore's steel division. Lorelei called Cordelia, who answered on the first ring despite the hour. "I found it. The Consolidated merger is a trap." "Explain." Lorelei laid it out. The EPA investigation, the liability clause, the timeline. Cordelia was silent for a long moment. "Can you prove it?" "I have public documents. I need internal Consolidated files to be certain. I'll have someone in Dallas by morning." The next morning, Lorelei assembled her findings into a 40-page report. She included financial projections, risk assessments, alternative scenarios. Cordelia's Dallas investigator came through by noon. Internal Consolidated emails, leaked by a nervous compliance officer, confirmed it. Consolidated's executives knew about the EPA investigation. They'd structured the merger specifically to offload liability onto Whitmore. At 3 p.m., Lorelei requested an emergency board meeting. Thad tried to block it. Waverly Cross overruled him. The board reconvened on Friday, March 14th. Lorelei stood at the head of the table and walked them through it. The EPA investigation, the liability clause, the projections showing potential bankruptcy within 18 months of merger completion. Halfway through, Thad interrupted. "This is speculative. The EPA investigation is preliminary. Consolidated's legal team is confident. Consolidated's legal team is lying to you." Lorelei pulled up an email on the screen. "Their own compliance officer says the dumping was systemic and willful. The EPA has soil samples." Mitchell was scanning the documents, his face growing darker. "Jesus Christ. Thaddeus, did you read page 147? "Of course I read it. Environmental liability sharing is standard." "Not when the environmental liabilities could exceed the merger value." Thad stood, his control finally cracking. "I've been negotiating this deal for 9 months. It's the future of this company. We're going to be bankrupt." Waverly Cross's voice cut like a scalpel. "Ms. Ashford's projections are conservative. If the EPA fines reach maximum, we could be looking at total losses exceeding $1 billion. Then we fight it in court. We have good lawyers." Gus's voice, quiet until now, brought silence. "Consolidated has government prosecutors with unlimited budgets. You really think we'd win that fight?" Thad turned to his father, something desperate in his eyes. "You're taking her side? Some girl you met 2 weeks ago over your own son?" "I'm taking the side of the 70,000 people who work for this company." Gus stood, not bothering with his cane. "I gave you CEO because I thought you were ready. But you forgot the first rule. Don't make deals with people who can't look you in the eye. This is about your paranoia. Business is always the same. It's about trust. You either have it or you don't." Gus looked at the board. "I'm exercising my authority as majority shareholder to override this board and kill the consolidated merger, effective immediately. Chaos erupted, board members shouting, some supporting Gus, others protesting. Thad's voice rose above them all. "You can't do that. You gave me power of attorney last year. You're not legally competent." "Wrong," Cordelia stood. "Augustus revoked your power of attorney on February 23rd. I witnessed it. It's been filed with the county clerk." Thad went very still. "You planned this, all of it." "I planned to give you enough rope." Gus's voice was tired. "You used it to hang both of us." 3 board members, all Thad's people, stood and walked out. Waverly called for a vote. 6 in favor of killing the merger, 2 opposed, 3 abstentions. The merger was dead. Thad gathered his material slowly, precisely. When he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "You'll regret this, both of you." He walked out, pulling out his phone before he'd even cleared the doorway. The stock price dropped 19% in the first hour after news broke. By market close, they'd lost $800 million in market capitalization. That evening, Lorelei watched it all from her office. Bloomberg terminal glowing. Her phone had been ringing non-stop. She'd stopped answering around 3 p.m. At 7, Cordelia appeared. "Augustus wants to see you. The estate." At the Lake Forest house, Gus stood by the window overlooking the frozen lake. "They're calling for my head." 3 institutional investors requested emergency shareholder meetings. They want me to step down, install Thad as sole decision-maker, and approve the consolidated merger within 30 days. Can they do that? If they get enough votes. He turned to face her. "I own 20% directly, another 15 through family trusts. Enough to block most resolutions, but not if the entire board turns against me." "I'm sorry." "You did exactly right. Better a controlled burn than waiting for the whole thing to explode." Gus moved to his desk, poured 2 whiskeys. "The problem isn't the market. Markets are stupid and emotional. The problem is Thad. He'll see this as the ultimate humiliation. He's not going to let this go." He handed her a glass. "Thad's been building a medical case for conservatorship. Dr. Pemberton prescribed those sedatives on his instructions. Documented my confused episodes. If Thad pushes for a competency hearing, he's got 6 months of evidence saying I'm not fit to manage anything." The whiskey turned to acid in Lorelei's throat. "That's elder abuse. That's desperation." Gus drained his glass. "I've been too proud to admit my own son would do this." Cordelia entered carrying her tablet. "We have a more immediate problem. Catherine Ashford was admitted to Columbus Memorial an hour ago. Acute kidney failure. Emergency dialysis." Lorelei stood so fast her chair rolled backward. "What?" "She was stable. Someone gave her medication that interfered with her kidney function. Preliminary findings show benzodiazepines in her system. High dose." The room tilted. Lorelei grabbed the desk edge. "Mom doesn't take benzodiazepines." "I know." Cordelia's voice was gentle. "The hospital flagged it as suspicious. They're filing a police report." Gus's face had gone gray. "Thaddeus." He pulled out his phone, showed Lorelei a text from Thad, sent an hour after the board meeting. "You chose her over family. Live with the consequences." Lorelei's vision tunneled. "He tried to kill my mother. He tried to send a message." Gus's voice was hard as forge iron. "Hurt her enough to scare you off. We need to go to the police." "With what evidence?" Cordelia's pragmatism cut through the rage. "A text that could mean anything. No proof Thad was anywhere near Columbus. So we just let him." "We fight smarter," Gus straightened. "Cordelia, medical team to Columbus. Now. Wheels up in 2 hours." He looked at Lorelei. "You go to your mother. I'll handle the fallout here. Because the gloves are off now." The flight to Columbus took 90 minutes. Catherine was conscious when Lorelei burst into her ICU room, which was a mercy. Pale, hooked up to machines, but alive. "Baby." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You didn't have to come." Lorelei grabbed her mother's hand. "What happened?" "Pharmacy. Young man behind the counter said the doctor called in something new for my blood pressure. I took it when I got home. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Then everything got fuzzy. What did he look like? 25 maybe, clean cut. Name tag said Michael. Lorelei spent the next 3 hours with hospital security, Columbus police, then the FBI. She gave them everything. Thad's text, the timeline, the motive. The FBI agent, a tired-looking woman named Reeves, took notes. Ms. Ashford, unless we can tie Thaddeus Whitmore directly to whoever gave your mother those pills, this is going to be hard to prove. Rich people have layers. So he just gets away with it? I didn't say that. I said it's hard, not impossible. Reeves closed her notebook. We'll assign protection to your mother, and you might want to watch your own back. The transplant team Gus had sent arrived at 1 a.m. Their preliminary assessment was cautiously optimistic. The kidney damage wasn't permanent. Catherine could still receive a transplant once she stabilized. At 2 a.m., Lorelei collapsed on the guest bed at her mother's house. Sleep came in fragments. Her phone woke her at 6. Cordelia's number. Turn on CNBC. Lorelei found the remote. Breaking news from Chicago, where sources inside Whitmore Steel confirmed that CEO Thaddeus Whitmore has filed a petition for conservatorship of his father, Augustus Whitmore, citing diminished mental capacity and erratic business decisions. The stock ticker showed Whitmore Steel down another 12% in pre-market trading. Cordelia's voice came through the phone. The hearing is Friday, 3 days. Thad's pushing for emergency consideration. Can we fight it? We have to. If Thad gets conservatorship, he controls Augustus's voting shares. He'll approve consolidated, fire you, and probably sell off half the company before everything crashes. Lorelei looked at her reflection in the darkened TV screen. I need to get back to Chicago. The jet is already en route. The conservatorship petition was devastating. Lorelei read it on the flight back to Chicago, her stomach twisting with each page. Thad's lawyers had built a meticulous case. Gus's age, his stroke 18 months ago, the medications, documented instances of confusion, and, most damning, the decision to kill a lucrative merger based on paranoid suspicions, while appointing an unqualified outsider to a critical executive role. They'd even found board members willing to testify. Mitchell's name was conspicuously absent, but 4 others had signed affidavits supporting Thad's petition. At Whitmore HQ, chaos reigned. Reporters camped in the lobby. Employees whispered in hallways. The executive floor felt like a funeral home. Lorelei found Mitchell in his office, staring at spreadsheets. I heard about your mother. I'm sorry. Did you know Thad was planning this? I knew he was collecting ammunition. Didn't know he'd actually pull the trigger. Mitchell looked older than his 58 years. For what it's worth, I refused to sign his affidavit. So did 3 others. But he got enough board members to make the petition credible. He pulled up a financial model on his screen. I ran the numbers. If Thad gets his way, Whitmore Steel will show phenomenal returns for exactly 2 quarters. Then the EPA hammers consolidated, the liabilities transfer to us, and we're bankrupt by Q3 next year. 14,000 direct employees out of work. Another 60,000 in the supply chain affected. So we can't let him win. No argument here. Problem is, I don't know how we stop him. The medical evidence looks bad, and killing that merger cost us $800 million in market cap. To an outside judge, Gus looks incompetent. Cordelia materialized in the doorway. We prove Augustus is competent, which means we need 2 things: updated medical evaluations from independent doctors and evidence that his business judgment is sound. We killed an $800 million deal. Lorelei gestured at the still falling stock price. How is that sound judgment? Because we can prove Consolidated was toxic. Cordelia held up her tablet. Our Dallas investigator got deeper into their files. Consolidated's executives knew about the EPA violations 3 years ago. They've been cooking the books to hide remediation costs. When this breaks, and it will break, consolidated stock will crater. When does it break? That depends on whether we want to wait for the EPA or leak it ourselves. Cordelia's smile was sharp. I'm inclined toward option 2. Tomorrow morning's Wall Street Journal would be perfect timing. That's market manipulation. That's protecting 70,000 jobs. Mitchell's voice was firm. If you have moral qualms, now's not the time. Lorelei thought about her mother in that hospital bed, about Thad's text. Live with the consequences. Leak it. The Wall Street Journal story hit at 6 a.m. Thursday, 36 hours before the conservatorship hearing. Consolidated Materials faces $800 million plus in environmental liabilities, sources say. By market open, Consolidated stock was in freefall. By noon, they'd lost $3 billion in market cap. Their CEO issued a statement calling the allegations baseless, which convinced exactly no one. Thad responded through his lawyers. These allegations, whether true or false, do not change the fact that Augustus Whitmore's decision was based on unfounded paranoia, not business analysis. The timing of this leak, days before a conservatorship hearing, speaks to his deteriorating judgment and willingness to manipulate markets for personal gain. The media ran split-screen debates. Cable news analysts argued both sides. Through it all, Gus remained silent. He stayed at the Lake Forest estate, refusing interviews. Cordelia assured Lorelei this was strategic. Let Thad exhaust himself attacking a ghost. On Thursday afternoon, Lorelei's phone rang. Agent Reeves. Ms. Ashford, we've made an arrest in your mother's case. Lorelei's heart stopped. Who? Michael Strand, 26, pharmacy technician. He confessed to substituting your mother's medication with benzodiazepines. Claims he was paid $5,000 cash by a man he met once. The description doesn't match Thaddeus Whitmore, but we're investigating the connection. So Thad used a cutout? That's our working theory. Mr. Strand is cooperating. If we can trace the money, we might build a conspiracy case, but that takes time. Time they didn't have. The hearing was in less than 24 hours. Thank you, Agent Reeves. Lorelei called Cordelia, relayed the information. It's something, but not enough for tomorrow. Even if we prove Thad was behind it, that's a criminal matter separate from conservatorship. We still need to prove Augustus is competent. What about the doctors you hired? 3 independent psychiatrists evaluated him this week. All say he's cognitively intact. But Thad's doctors will testify to the opposite. Becomes dueling experts. We need something definitive. Or we need Thad to destroy his own case. Friday morning arrived with the inevitability of execution. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Cook County Circuit Court. Lorelei arrived with Cordelia at 9, feeling the weight of cameras and reporters shouting questions. Inside, the courtroom was surprisingly small. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the kind of institutional space where life-altering decisions got made by bureaucrats. Thad sat at the petitioner's table with 3 lawyers in expensive suits. He looked composed, confident, like a man who'd already won. Gus sat at the respondent's table with Cordelia and a sharp-eyed attorney named Patricia Chen, who specialized in elder law. He dressed simply, gray slacks, navy blazer, no tie. The judge entered, Honorable Marcus Webb, mid-60s, reputation for no-nonsense efficiency. He scanned the packed gallery with obvious distaste. This is a conservatorship proceeding, not a media circus. I want all recording devices off. Bailiff, clear anyone who doesn't have direct interest. It took 20 minutes to empty the courtroom of reporters. When only the principals remained, Judge Webb continued. Mr. Whitmore, you've petitioned for conservatorship of your father on grounds of diminished mental capacity. You bear the burden of proof. Present your case. Thad's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Brennan, stood. Your Honor, will demonstrate through medical testimony and documented business decisions that Augustus Whitmore, while a brilliant entrepreneur in his prime, is no longer capable of managing his affairs. For the next 2 hours, they built their case. Dr. Pemberton testified about medications, confused episodes, resistance to treatment. A neurologist presented brain scans showing changes consistent with age-related cognitive decline. 4 board members described meetings where Gus seemed disoriented or stuck in the past. Then came the business decisions. Brennan walked the judge through the killed consolidated merger, the appointment of Lorelei, a waitress with no steel industry experience, the resulting stock collapse. Augustus Whitmore built a great company, but the man sitting in this courtroom is not the same man who built it. He's an elderly individual whose mind is failing, whose judgment is compromised, and who needs protection from himself and those who would exploit his confusion. Brennan sat. Judge Webb looked at Patricia Chen. Response? Chen stood, crisp and professional. Your Honor, will prove that everything the petitioner calls cognitive decline is actually sound judgment being misrepresented by those with financial interest in controlling Mr. Whitmore's assets. She called their own doctors, 3 psychiatrists who'd evaluated Gus over the past week. All testified he showed no signs of dementia or impaired reasoning. Dr. Pemberton's medications weren't treating cognitive decline. They were causing it. Once we discontinued the benzodiazepines prescribed through a compliant physician, Mr. Whitmore's mental clarity improved dramatically. Then came the business case. Mitchell testified about the consolidated deal, walking the judge through the EPA liabilities. Augustus's decision to kill that merger wasn't paranoia. It was the only responsible choice. His son either didn't do proper due diligence or didn't care about long-term consequences. Mitchell paused, then added something that wasn't in his prepared testimony. I've been CFO at Whitmore Steel for 12 years. I've watched Augustus make tough calls that cost us short-term gains, but saved us long-term. I've also watched his son prioritize quarterly earnings over everything else. When I saw Ms. Ashford's analysis of Consolidated, I realized Augustus was right to trust his instincts. The numbers proved it. That's not incompetence, that's wisdom. Brennan objected repeatedly. Judge Webb sustained some, overruled others. Finally, Chen called Gus himself. He walked to the witness stand without assistance, placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. He sat carefully, arranged his hands in his lap. Chen began gently. Mr. Whitmore, do you understand why we're here today? My son thinks I'm losing my mind and wants legal authority to make my decisions for me. Are you losing your mind? No, but I understand why Thaddeus thinks I am. We see the world differently, always have. Explain. Gus took a breath. I grew up in West Virginia. My father worked coal mines until they destroyed his lungs. I came to Pittsburgh with nothing, worked steel mills for $2.50 an hour. Everything I did by knowing the people who work for me, their names, their families, what they needed to survive. His voice steadied, strengthened. Thaddeus grew up in Lake Forest, private schools, Harvard MBA, corner office handed to him. He sees business as numbers on spreadsheets. I see it as people's lives. When he looks at Consolidated, he sees $2.4 billion in revenue. I see 70,000 families who'd lose everything when the EPA fines hit and we declare bankruptcy. Judge Webb leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore, your son's attorneys claim you appointed an unqualified waitress to a critical executive position. How do you respond? Gus's eyes found Lorelei in the gallery. Lorelei Ashford has a master's degree in computer science from one of the best universities in this country. She built a company from nothing before my son's acquisition team crushed it. She spent 2 weeks auditing Whitmore Steel and found problems my MBA-educated executives either missed or ignored. She saved this company. She also caused an $800 million stock decline. Short-term, yes. Long-term, she prevented a billion-dollar bankruptcy. If being competent means caring more about stock prices than survival, then maybe I am incompetent by Wall Street standards. But by the standards of the men who gave me $500 in 1962, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to, protecting what they helped me build. The courtroom fell silent. Brennan stood for cross-examination. Mr. Whitmore, you claim Ms. Ashford saved the company, but isn't it true that you appointed her because she's the granddaughter of men you felt indebted to? Emotional reasoning rather than business judgment. Both can be true. She's qualified and I owe her family. Those aren't contradictory. Your decision to revoke your son's power of attorney, done in secret, without board consultation, does that demonstrate sound judgment? It demonstrates protecting myself from someone who was medicating me into compliance. Brennan's jaw tightened. You've accused your son of terrible things. Do you have proof? I have 6 months of prescriptions I never asked for, and a son who benefited from my confusion. That's proof enough for me. The cross-examination continued for another hour, Brennan trying to shake Gus's composure, Gus remaining steady. Finally, Judge Webb called a recess. During the break, Lorelei found Gus in the hallway. You did well in there. Did I? Hard to tell with Webb. Man's got a poker face that could win world championships. Cordelia approached, phone in hand. FBI just called. Michael Strand's bank records show a cash deposit of $5,000 2 days before he drugged Catherine. The deposit slip was filled out at a downtown Chicago bank. Security footage shows a man matching Thad's description making the deposit. Matching isn't definitive. No, but it's enough to request a fraud investigation, which I've already done. They reconvened at 3 p.m. Judge Webb had clearly spent the recess reviewing documents. I've heard compelling arguments from both sides. This is an unusually complex case involving family dynamics, business disagreements, and legitimate concerns about competency. Lorelei's stomach dropped. That sounded like the preamble to granting the conservatorship. However, Webb's tone shifted. I'm troubled by several aspects of the petitioner's case. The medical testimony regarding medications prescribed by Dr. Pemberton raises serious questions about whether we're seeing genuine cognitive decline or drug-induced impairment. The business decisions, while controversial, appear to have sound reasoning when examined closely. Thad's face went pale. Webb continued, I'm also troubled by information that's come to light during today's proceedings regarding potential criminal activity related to Catherine Ashford's hospitalization. While that's not directly relevant to this hearing, it speaks to the credibility of the parties involved. He looked directly at Thad. This court finds insufficient evidence to establish that Augustus Whitmore lacks capacity to manage his affairs. The petition for conservatorship is denied. The words took a moment to register. Then Cordelia grabbed Lorelei's hand, squeezed hard. They'd won. Brennan was already objecting, asking for reconsideration, but Webb was done. My ruling stands. This hearing is adjourned. Thad stood so abruptly his chair fell backward. He stared at his father across the courtroom, his face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Then he turned and walked out, his lawyer scrambling to follow. Gus sat very still for a long moment. Then he stood, crossed to where Lorelei waited, and pulled her into a hug that smelled like old wool and determination. Thank you. I didn't do anything. You won this yourself. You gave me a reason to fight. That's everything. Outside, reporters descended like locusts. Cordelia handled them with practiced efficiency, while Patricia got Gus to the waiting car. In the car, finally moving away from the chaos, Gus made a phone call. Emergency board meeting, Monday morning. Yes, I'm invoking my authority as chairman. Tell them attendance is mandatory. He hung up, looked at Lorelei and Cordelia. It's time to finish this. The weekend passed in a blur. Lorelei flew back to Columbus Saturday morning to check on her mother. Catherine was sitting up in bed, color returning to her cheeks. The transplant team cautiously optimistic. The doctors say I'll be ready for surgery in 2 weeks. Catherine squeezed Lorelei's hand. Baby, what you've done. I haven't done anything yet, Mom, but I'm going to. Sunday evening, Lorelei returned to Chicago. She spent the night in a hotel near the office, unable to sleep, running through scenarios for Monday's board meeting. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. An email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From Thad." She almost deleted it, then curiosity won. The email was short. "Lorelei, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I need you to understand something. I didn't know about your mother until after it happened. When I sent that text to my father, I meant I was going to fight harder in the conservatorship hearing. I didn't mean that. Someone on my team took initiative they shouldn't have. I fired him and cooperated fully with the FBI. I know that doesn't undo the harm. Nothing can. You were right about Consolidated. I was so focused on the revenue numbers, I missed the liability clause. Or maybe I saw it and convinced myself it wouldn't matter. Either way, that's on me. My father and I have never understood each other. He sees me as Vivian's creation, soft, disconnected from real work. Maybe he's right. I spent my whole life trying to prove I could run his company better than he did. Turns out I was just better at destroying it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just telling you the truth. You belong in that boardroom more than I ever did. Thad." Lorelei read it 3 times. She didn't know if she believed him about her mother, but the rest rang true. The desperation of a man realizing he'd become the villain in his own story. She closed her laptop without responding. Monday's board meeting had the feeling of an execution. All 11 members present, plus Lorelei and Cordelia. Thad was conspicuously absent. Gus stood at the head of the table, no wheelchair, no cane. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Thaddeus Whitmore as CEO." The room erupted. Mitchell looked relieved. Others looked terrified. Waverly Cross raised her hand. "On what grounds?" "Incompetence in due diligence regarding the Consolidated merger. Potential involvement in criminal activity against Catherine Ashford. And systematic undermining of his father's medical care to facilitate a conservatorship proceeding." Cordelia distributed packets containing bank records, emails between Thad and Dr. Pemberton, and internal consolidated documents showing Thad had received consulting fees while negotiating a merger he knew was built on hidden liabilities. The board members read in silence. Several faces went gray. Mitchell spoke first. "If even half of this is true, we have no choice. But Augustus, he's your son. He's also unfit to lead this company." Gus's voice was firm. "And I won't let him destroy what 70,000 people depend on because I'm too sentimental to do what's necessary." The vote was 8-3. Thad was out. Gus didn't pause. "I'm appointing Lorelei Ashford as permanent Chief Operating Officer with a pathway to CEO within 6 months pending board approval." One of Thad's supporters stood up. "This is insane. She's been here 6 weeks. She's also saved us from bankruptcy, exposed corruption, and proven she understands what this company actually is. People building things, not spreadsheets extracting value." Waverly Cross spoke carefully. "Augustus, I respect what Ms. Ashford has accomplished, but promoting someone this quickly, especially given the family connection to your historical debt, it opens us to shareholder lawsuits claiming nepotism or undue influence." "Then let them sue." Gus's voice carried steel. "I'll testify in every deposition that this decision is based on merit, not sentiment. The board can document her performance over the next 6 months. If she doesn't prove herself, we revisit. But I'm not going to punish competence because of optics." Mitchell raised his hand. "I'd like to add something. Over the past 6 weeks, I've worked closely with Ms. Ashford. She asks the right questions. She challenges assumptions. She caught a billion-dollar mistake that every executive in this company missed, including me. I've seen Harvard MBAs with 15 years of experience who couldn't do what she did in 2 weeks. I'm voting yes." The vote was 7-4. Lorelei had her promotion. Gus pulled out a legal document already signed. "One more thing. Transfer of 20% voting shares in Whitmore Steel Industries to the Burke Ashford Family Trust. Lorelei Ashford as sole trustee, effective immediately. He slid it across the table to her. 20% of current valuation is approximately $1.04 billion. The shares come with voting rights, board representation, and annual dividends. Cordelia will help you set up the trust structure. Lorelei stared at the document. $1 billion. Gus, I can't. You can, and you will. His voice was gentle, but absolute. 63 years ago, two men gave me everything they had. This isn't generosity. It's compound interest on the best investment anyone ever made. He held out a pen. Lorelei took it. Her hands shook as she signed. Waverly Cross cleared her throat. For the record, I'm voting in favor of this transfer. Not because of sentiment, but because having a major shareholder who actually cares about long-term stability instead of quarterly pumps is exactly what this company needs. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some congratulating Lorelei, others avoiding eye contact. Mitchell approached as she gathered her things. Welcome to the club. It's lonely at the top, but the view's spectacular. I don't feel ready for this. Nobody does. That's how you know you're the right person for the job. He smiled. The ones who think they're ready are the ones who destroy companies. Ask me how I know. After everyone left, Gus pulled Lorelei aside. There's something I need to show you. He led her to his office, Cordelia following. From his desk drawer, he pulled out an old leather journal, the kind with a strap closure. This was Edmund Burke's. Your mother sent it to me last week. She found it in his things after you told her about our connection. He opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. The handwriting was shaky but legible, dated March 1998, 4 months before Silas died. Read it. Lorelei took the journal. The entry read, Silas and I were talking today about the young man we gave our savings to back in '62, Gus Whitmore. We saw in the papers he's worth $800 million now. Built a whole empire. Silas asked if I regret giving him that money. If we'd kept it, maybe we'd have our own shops by now. Maybe we wouldn't be so broke all the time. I told him what I've always believed. We didn't give Gus money. We gave him permission to become who he was meant to be. Sometimes that's worth more than any shop we could have built. If he never finds us, that's okay. If he never pays us back, that's okay too. We bet on fire, not interest rates. Fire doesn't owe you anything, it just burns. Lorelei's eyes filled with tears. They didn't expect anything back. I know. Gus's voice was rough, which makes the debt even bigger. They gave without expecting, the rarest thing in the world. He took the journal gently, closed it. That's why the 20% isn't payment. It's acknowledgement. It's saying their bet mattered. It's making sure Edmund and Silas's fire keeps burning through you. 6 days later, on a Sunday afternoon in early April, Lorelei stood in a cemetery outside Columbus, Ohio. Fresh flowers covered Edmund Burke's grave, now marked with a proper headstone that read, Edmund Burke, 1918 to 2008. He believed in fire. Next to it, Silas Ashford's stone. Silas Ashford, 1920 to 1998. His bet changed the world. Gus stood beside her, leaning slightly on his cane, but looking healthier than he had in months. Catherine sat in a wheelchair, recovering well from successful transplant surgery 2 days ago, color back in her cheeks for the first time in years. They would have been proud, Catherine's voice was strong again, not of the money, of what you've become. Lorelei thought about the last 6 days. Whitmore Steel's stock had started recovering once the full, consolidated scandal broke. The EPA announced formal charges. Consolidated's CEO resigned, and analysts praised Augustus's prescient decision to kill the merger. Thad had quietly resigned, taking a settlement. The FBI investigation was ongoing, but Strand had confirmed someone from Whitmore's executive team paid him, not Thad directly. She thought about the Burke Ashford Foundation, now capitalized at $60 million, giving $500 grants to working-class entrepreneurs across the Rust Belt. About the 70,000 Whitmore Steel employees who still had jobs. About her mother, alive and healing, talking about finally taking that trip to Ireland. I spent 63 years looking for them so I could say, thank you. Gus placed his hand on Edmund's headstone. Turns out they sent me their granddaughter to teach me what thanks actually means. What does it mean? Not letting their fire go out. He looked at Lorelei. You've got it now. That same fire Edmund and Silas saw in me. Don't waste it being careful or polite or anything other than exactly what they raised you to be. Someone who builds instead of destroys. Catherine wheeled herself closer to the graves. You know what Edmund told me the day before his stroke? I was 14, visiting with my father. Edmund said, Catherine, the best thing you can do with money is give it to someone with dreams bigger than their wallet. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Lorelei knelt between the two graves, placed her hands on the cold stone. I promise, she whispered. I promise I won't waste what you started. In the distance, church bells rang. Spring wind rustled through oak trees that were just beginning to bud. Gus helped Catherine back to the car. Lorelei followed slowly, carrying the weight of a billion-dollar legacy and a simple truth. The best investments aren't measured in returns, but in the fires they help others kindle. As they drove away from the cemetery, Lorelei's phone buzzed. An email from Mitchell with the subject line, Tomorrow's WSJ FYI. She opened it. A Wall Street Journal article scheduled for Tuesday's business section. Whitmore Steel names 29-year-old COO in stunning shakeup. Lorelei Ashford, former tech CEO, takes reins as company pivots from family drama to future focus. The article was surprisingly fair. It detailed her background, the consolidated near miss, and quoted Waverly Cross. Sometimes the best leaders are the ones who've tasted failure and learned from it. Miss Ashford lost her own company. She won't let that happen to ours. Lorelei showed it to Gus. He read it, smiled. They spelled your name right. That's a good sign. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He looked out at the Ohio countryside rolling past. You know what Edmund wrote in that journal entry I didn't show you? He said, the young man we helped didn't just need money. He needed someone to believe in him when he didn't believe in himself. That's the real gift. Gus turned to face her. I'm giving you the same gift Edmund and Silas gave me. Not money, belief. Don't prove me right. Prove them right. 3 months later, Whitmore Steel Industries held its annual shareholders meeting. Lorelei stood at the podium in the same ballroom where, decades ago, Augustus Whitmore had announced his first major expansion. She wore a navy suit, practical heels, and no jewelry except a small pendant, a steel flame commissioned by Gus, symbolizing the Burke Ashford Foundation. Good morning. For those who don't know me, I'm Lorelei Ashford, Chief Operating Officer. 3 months ago, I was serving tables. Today, I'm standing before you as a steward of a company built by the belief of working people in a kid with a dream. The room was packed. Institutional investors, financial press, employees who'd taken vacation days to attend. And in the front row, Gus, Catherine, Cordelia, and Mitchell. This year has tested us. We killed a merger that looked lucrative but would have destroyed us. We faced leadership upheaval. We lost $800 million in market cap. Some of you are angry about that. I understand. She pulled up a slide showing financial projections. But because we killed that merger, we avoided $900 million in EPA liabilities. We restructured operations to improve quality without sacrificing jobs. And we're projecting 18% revenue growth next year. Sustainable growth, not the kind that requires gutting our workforce. Another slide, the Burke Ashford Foundation logo. We've also established a foundation that's already funded 47 new businesses started by working-class entrepreneurs. We're not doing this to feel good. We're doing it because that's how Whitmore Steel started. with two factory workers betting on a kid who had nothing but fire. She paused, looked directly at the institutional investors who'd called for Gus's removal. You can invest in companies that maximize quarterly returns through financial engineering, or you can invest in companies that build things, employ people, and measure success in decades instead of quarters. If you want the former, I respectfully suggest you sell your shares. If you want the latter, we're just getting started. The speech lasted 20 minutes. When she finished, the applause was mixed. Some enthusiastic, some polite, some absent. But Gus was standing, tears in his eyes, clapping like she'd just won an Olympic medal. After the meeting, as shareholders mingled over coffee, Mitchell approached. That was either brilliant or career suicide. I can't tell which yet. Probably both. For what it's worth, I believed every word. He handed her a folder. Also, 3 institutional investors approached me during the break. They want to increase their positions. Your honesty spooked the gamblers, but the long-term players loved it. Waverly Cross joined them, a rare smile on her stern face. Ms. Ashford, I've been on corporate boards for 30 years. That's the first shareholder speech I've heard that didn't sound like it was written by lawyers. Congratulations on having a spine. As the crowd thinned, Lorelei found Gus on the balcony overlooking Lake Michigan. You did good in there. He didn't look at her, just kept staring at the water. Edmund and Silas would have been proud. You think we'll actually pull this off? Turn the company around? Doesn't matter, he glanced at her. What matters is we're trying to build something worth keeping instead of something worth selling. That's the difference between their way and Thad's way. Do you miss him, Thad? Gus was quiet for a long moment. Every day. But missing someone doesn't mean they were right. It just means they were yours. He turned to face her fully. You know what I realized during that conservatorship hearing? Thad and I were both trying to honor Vivian in different ways. He tried to become what she wanted. I tried to reject it. We both missed the point. Which was? That you can't build something real by trying to please ghosts. You have to build for the living. He gestured back toward the ballroom. Those 70,000 employees, they're living. Their families are living. The kids who get Burke Ashford grants? Living. That's who we build for now. Catherine appeared in the doorway, walking slowly with a cane but walking. Baby, they're about to serve lunch. You should eat something. Lorelei hugged her mother carefully, still protective of the healing transplant incision. How are you feeling, Mom? Like I'm going to live long enough to see you become CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Catherine smiled. No pressure. That evening, after the shareholders dispersed and the ballroom staff cleaned up, Lorelei sat in her office, 52 floors above Chicago. The city lights spread out below like a circuit board. Her computer dinged. An email from Thad. Lorelei, I watched the shareholder meeting live stream. You were right about everything. I'm starting a small consulting firm helping tech companies avoid the mistakes I made. Nothing fancy, just trying to build something honest. Good luck with Whitmore. They're lucky to have you. T. She read it twice, then filed it away without responding. Some conversations needed time. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cordelia. Board vote tomorrow at 9 a.m. Prepare yourself. For what? You'll see. The next morning, Lorelei arrived at the boardroom to find all 11 members already seated. Gus stood at the head of the table, looking more energized than she'd seen him in months. Ms. Ashford, please sit. She took the seat next to Mitchell, her stomach nodding. Gus addressed the room. I'm formally stepping down as chairman of the board, effective in 6 months. I'm recommending Waverly Cross as my replacement. She has the experience, the integrity, and the willingness to tell me when I'm wrong, which is the most important qualification. Waverly inclined her head in acknowledgement. I'm also Lorelei sat in stunned silence as Cordelia produced the paperwork, already prepared because, of course, she had been. Gus walked around the table, extended his hand. Congratulations, CEO Ashford. Don't screw it up. She shook his hand, felt the calluses from decades-old steelwork, saw the tears he wasn't bothering to hide. I'll try not to. That's all Edmund and Silas ever asked of me. Just try. The rest is up to God and the market. After the board meeting, after the press release went out, after the phone started ringing with congratulations and interview requests, Lorelei stood alone in what was now her office. CEO of Whitmore Steel Industries, 29 years old, 91 days after serving meatloaf to a man who needed something real in a world of expensive lies. She thought about her father, Garrett, crushed in a factory because a company chose profit over safety. She thought about Silas and Edmund, working their whole lives and dying broke. She thought about the path from bankruptcy to boardroom, paved with luck and loss, and one plate of honest food. Her phone rang. Columbus number. She answered. "Baby, I just saw the news." Catherine's voice was pure joy. "CEO, your father would be so proud." "I'm terrified, Mom." "Good, that means you care." Catherine paused. "You know what your father said before he died?" He said, "Make sure Lorelei knows that building something good is worth more than getting rich." I think you just did both. That night, Lorelei stayed late in the office. She pulled up Whitmore Steel's employee directory, 70,000 names, faces, lives. People in Gary, Indiana who worked blast furnaces. People in Birmingham who ran quality control. People in Pittsburgh where it all started. She opened a new document, started typing. To the employees of Whitmore Steel, my name is Lorelei Ashford, and as of today, I'm your CEO. I know many of you are wondering who I am and why you should trust me with your livelihoods. Here's the truth. I don't come from steel. I come from failure. 3 months ago, I was bankrupt, desperate, and serving tables. Today, I'm here because 2 men named Edmund Burke and Silas Ashford believed in Augustus Whitmore when he had nothing. They taught him that business isn't about extraction. It's about building. Not just products, people, communities, futures. That's what we're going to do together. Build things that last. Take care of the people who build them. And remember that every piece of steel we make carries the hopes of families who depend on us to do right by them. We won't always succeed, but we'll always try. That's my promise to you, made on the memory of 2 factory workers who changed the world with $500 and belief. Let's get to work. Lorelei Ashford, CEO. She read it twice, then sent it to every employee email address in the system. Within an hour, responses started flooding in. Workers thanking her, sharing their own stories, telling her about the old days when Augustus used to walk the floor and knew their names. One email stopped her cold, from a line worker in Gary named James Peterson. "Miss Ashford, my grandfather worked the same shift as Edmund Burke in Pittsburgh, 1962. He told me about the 3 young guys who were always together, dreaming big. He said Edmund and Silas never regretted giving Gus that money, even when they were struggling. They were proud of him. I think they'd be proud of you too. Let's make some steel." Lorelei closed her laptop, stood at the window overlooking Chicago. The city glittered with the work of people who built things. Steel frames, glass towers, bridges spanning rivers. Somewhere in that sprawl, fires burned in blast furnaces, turning scrap into strength. Just like Edmund and Silas had done with $500 and a belief that fire, once kindled, never truly dies. It just finds new places to burn.